Yeah.
Three generations.
Yep.
No, man, to be honest with you, I don't really think about that. I just think about working hard, keep stepping up, and keep up in the rankings and keep proving ourselves. And boxing changes so quick, man, you know?
David Benavidez' last day of training before his big fight with David Morrell was intense. Inside his gym in Phoenix, the energy was high as he prepared for the toughest fight of his career. As a two-time WBC super middleweight champion, Benavidez is known for his aggressive style, sharp boxing, and incredible stamina. He was giving it his all, making sure he was fully ready. The training session kicked off with a tough round of sparring. Benavidez sparred against opponents chosen to match Morrell's southpaw style, helping him prepare for fight night. He didn't hold back, throwing fast combinations, doubling his jabs, landing sharp right hands, and delivering powerful body shots. His movement was precise as he worked on trapping his opponents, making sure Morrell wouldn't be able to escape his pressure. His sparring partners were quick and tried to move around him, but Benavidez stayed on them the whole time, not letting them catch a breath. Benavidez's father and trainer, Jose Benavidez Sr., watched closely from the side, giving advice between rounds. The sparring wasn't just about power, it was about strategy. Benavidez focused on adjusting to Morrell's tricky southpaw stance, changing his footwork and defense to stay ahead. The pace was intense, pushing him to his limits as the rounds went on without a break. It was clear he was getting ready for a tough, grueling fight where his stamina would be just as important as his power.
We just have to be ready for the opportunities, you know? But no, I never really thought about that. We're active. We just want to be active, and keep fighting whoever. Otherwise, we're going to sit down, you know, waiting. We don't want to wait.
Interview. After sparring, Benavidez moved on to mitt work, showing off his speed and power. His father called out different combinations, and Benavidez responded instantly. The sharp sound of punches hitting the pads echoed through the gym as he practiced jabs, crosses, left hooks to the body, and uppercuts. His form was perfect, with every punch thrown with purpose. His father's voice cut through the session, giving small corrections to make sure everything was flawless. The focus was clear, perfecting combinations. Next came the heavy bag work, and Benavidez didn't hold back. He unleashed brutal combinations, focusing on the body. He knows Morrell tends to get hit, and he planned to take full advantage of that. Each punch landed with a heavy thud, sweat pouring down his face. But he kept pushing himself. His movements were smooth, and after every punch, he made sure to move his head, staying aware of any potential counters. He wasn't just focused on power. He was preparing for a fight that would demand constant movement and strong defense. Conditioning was a key part of Benavidez's training that day. Known for his stamina, he worked hard to keep that edge. He hit the treadmill for explosive sprints, pushing his cardio to the limit. He also spent time jumping rope to improve his foot speed and coordination, skills he'd need to close the distance and keep the pressure on throughout the fight. There was no room for fatigue in his plan. Every second had to count. His core work, including medicine ball slams and sit-ups, helped build the strength needed to withstand the punishment of a high-intensity fight like the one he was preparing for. But the most important part of the day was the mental preparation. Benavidez spent a lot of time visualizing the fight, running different scenarios in his head. He was focused and determined, knowing this fight could define his career. He spoke to his team with unwavering confidence. His words weren't just about believing in his skills. They showed the hard work he'd put in throughout the entire camp. By the time his final training session ended, Benavidez was both physically and mentally ready. His team was confident in his preparation, and as they wrapped up the day, there was a quiet sense of anticipation. The fight was almost here, and all that was left was for Benavidez to step into the ring and execute the plan they had worked so hard to perfect. Benavidez was ready to make a statement, and the energy in the gym made it clear. The showdown with David Morrell was going to be one for the ages. Great news for Benavidez fans. He shed the extra weight he was carrying just a month ago. The transformation happened quickly, and with another month to go before the fight, he could get even leaner. In the latest footage, Benavidez shows a resemblance to Morrell, but what truly sets him apart is his sharp combination punching. However, Benavidez might risk trouble with his approach. Trying to stay close and deliver those combos could be a mistake, especially against a fighter like Morrell. When Morrell hits hard, that aggressive style worked well for Benavidez at 168, where he overpowered aging opponents like Demetrius Andrade and outclassed lesser threats like Caleb Plant. But if Benavidez uses that same reckless approach against David Morrell or Artur Beterbiev, he won't just lose, he'll get knocked out. This is Benavidez's first true test in 11 years. He's built up his record against smaller opponents at 168, but his flaws are evident against Morrell. Things could get even uglier, especially if he sticks to his volume punching style, as seen in his recent training footage.
Regeneration.
Zishinu? It's believed that Morrell's poor performance against Rakhimov in his light heavyweight debut on August 3rd is the main reason Team Benavidez accepted this fight. Morrell had his opponent in trouble early on, but wasted the chance by going for a one-punch knockout instead of using combinations. That costly mistake exposed his inexperience. Against Benavidez, expect a sharper, more disciplined Morrell who has learned from that lapse. Benavidez fights upright, with a unique flow, like a faucet turned on. His attack just gathers strength as it goes. His constant barrage might overwhelm opponents to the point that the referee has to step in and stop the punishment. Morrell will try to counter Benavidez's relentless assault with his tight, high guard and well-timed counters. Changes are coming, but even with his disciplined defense, Benavidez's unyielding pressure is like a rising tide against a crumbling seawall. His sheer force wears opponents down until they can no longer resist. Benavidez's punches are undoubtedly powerful, but Morrell's explosiveness makes him a one-punch threat. If the southpaw times his shot perfectly and lands a power punch before Benavidez sees it coming, he could walk out of Las Vegas with 2 light heavyweight world titles. That possibility becomes even more dangerous if Morrell is varying his levels and throwing with explosive precision. In simple terms, Morrell doesn't have the professional experience that Benavidez has. Morrell has only fought in 11 professional bouts, while Benavidez has years of experience under his belt. Morrell has never faced a world champion, and the experience advantage clearly belongs to Benavidez by a huge margin. Over time, both have been able to irritate each other more and more, and their animosity is real. However, Benavidez has a slight edge in this mental battle due to his vast experience. Having already defeated superior opponents, he feels confident enough to talk about and brag about whatever he wants, turning his fighting words into action. Morrell, on the other hand, could be vulnerable to a shocking upset if he can't withstand the pressure. However, Benavidez has the advantage here as well. He tends to be more fluid in his approach, occasionally dropping his guard to throw punches with rhythm. In contrast, Morrell maintains a more disciplined defense, keeping his guard at forehead height and ensuring his chin is well protected. It's still uncertain if he can handle Benavidez's relentless pressure, but on paper, the Cuban fighter holds the edge in terms of defense heading into this matchup.
10 seconds. Let's go.
This highly anticipated clash has been years in the making, as Benavidez and Morrell face off with more than just the light heavyweight crown at stake. The winner has the chance to solidify their place as a dominant force in the division, potentially climb the pound-for-pound rankings, and build a lasting legacy as one of the sport's brightest stars for years to come. Boxing experts have collectively voiced their excitement for this showdown, with many eager to see how it unfolds. Believing there are clear paths to victory for both contenders, the oddsmakers share a similar view, calling the fight a toss-up. DraftKings Sportsbook has the odds set at Benavidez minus 190 and Morrell plus 155. Below is an in-depth collection of analysis from the boxing community as they await the final verdict in the ring this Saturday night. Boxing legend Juan Manuel Marquez, a pro boxing analyst, said, "This is going to be a complicated fight for Benavidez in the first few rounds." However, Benavidez's speed and the level of his past opponents are better than Morrell's. He has shown us his speed, power, and conditioning, which will be crucial, and allow him to overcome Morrell and win this fight by decision. Stephen A. Smith's comments on David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr. reflect not only his admiration for Benavidez, but also the excitement surrounding the fight. As a self-proclaimed huge Benavidez fan, Smith praises his fearlessness in the ring, noting that he ducks no one and is always ready for a challenge. This speaks to Benavidez's mentality. He doesn't shy away from tough opponents and is always prepared to prove himself at the highest level. Smith said, David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr. is a big fight. I'm a huge David Benavidez fan and I applaud him because he ducks no one. He's ready to fight at all times. He is the Mexican monster. Sometimes I wonder if someone is going to hurt him because he doesn't really move. Monster fits perfectly with the way Stephen A. Smith describes Benavidez. His ability to take punches and keep pressing forward has earned him respect, even from critics who might question his style. While Morrell has the size, power, reach, and speed to make this a tough fight for Benavidez, his lack of experience is a concern. Morrell made his mark as an amateur, but only has 11 pro fights, totaling 54 rounds. After a lackluster performance against Rakhmonov, it's hard to imagine him winning against a more seasoned fighter like Benavidez. Analyst Palmer also points to Morrell's unimpressive showing against Rakhmonov, suggesting this will be a massive step up for Morrell, facing someone with Benavidez's offensive firepower and experience. Palmer describes Benavidez as an aggressive, high-volume puncher who can overwhelm opponents with his constant pressure. He also notes that Benavidez's ability to adjust, switching between smothering offense and more calculated boxing, makes him a tough opponent for anyone. However, Palmer raises an interesting point. Benavidez's first fight at light heavyweight didn't go as smoothly as expected. He wonders if Benavidez's power at 175 pounds will be the same as it was at super middleweight, which could potentially affect his knockout ability in this fight. Despite this concern, Palmer still believes that Benavidez's superior experience, combined with his overall skill set, will lead him to victory, likely by decision. He added, "This fight is a huge step up in class against an aggressive, high-volume puncher like Benavidez, known for smothering opponents with his offense, also has the ability to move, box, and make adjustments." That said, he left a lot to be desired in his first fight at 175 pounds, leading to questions about whether he has the same power at light heavyweight as he did at super middleweight. I'm not sure he does, but his top-tier experience and pedigree should be enough to win here. I'm picking Benavidez to win by decision. Meanwhile, Chris Mannix said, "Tremendous fight, and kudos to both guys for taking it. 2 reasons I favor Benavidez: experience and activity. Benavidez's pro resume is significantly better, and that matters, especially in the later rounds. That's where Benavidez's motor will become a factor. I see this being a competitive fight in the first half. David taking over to win a clean decision in the second. Xavier Rodriguez from ESPN Deportes admits that predicting this fight isn't easy, acknowledging that both fighters bring their own strengths to the table. He points to Benavidez's experience over the past few years as something that could work heavily in his favor, while also recognizing that Morrell has the potential to pull off an upset. Rodriguez ultimately feels that Benavidez will win on February 1st, leaning toward the experience factor being the deciding point in what promises to be a highly competitive match. Xavier Rodriguez said, "This is not an easy fight to predict, but I believe that the experience David Benavidez has gained over the last couple of years will be crucial. It's a great fight and I wouldn't be surprised if Morrell won, but I'm going with Benavidez on February 1st. On the other hand, Keith Idec from Ring Magazine and Uncrowned.com feels that Morrell might actually be the most well-rounded opponent Benavidez has faced in his 11-year professional career. He highlights Morrell's skill, strength, and southpaw stance, which could make the early rounds very competitive. Keith Idec said, Morrell might be the most complete opponent of Benavidez's 11-year professional career. The skillful, strong southpaw should make the first several rounds very competitive, but his inexperience in this type of battle of attrition will eventually lead to Benavidez breaking down the unbeaten Cuban and stopping him before the championship rounds. Donovan from Ring Magazine offers a more nuanced view, acknowledging that some days he feels Benavidez might simply be too much for Morrell, especially with Benavidez's growth into light heavyweight. However, Donovan also considers the possibility that Morrell could surprise everyone and deliver a significantly better performance than what was seen in his August fight. Donovan said, "As much as I go back and forth, I'm going with my original instinct of David Benavidez finding a way to win. I don't see a stoppage either way, though I could see Morrell having a lot of success early and Benavidez staying in the fight, not falling too far behind before eventually pulling away in the second half. I think he edges out a decision in a very, very good fight." Morning Combat can't help but express his excitement for the David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr. fight, calling it one of the best matchups you can make in all of boxing. For Campbell, this fight is a clash of two unbeaten fighters in their physical primes, both ready to stake their claim for a shot at the undisputed light heavyweight crown. He also highlights the added drama between the two, with Benavidez and Morrell not exactly being fond of each other, which only adds more spice to the already heated rivalry.
This is a real-ass fight, and one of, I would really go as far as saying, the 5 or 6 best you could make in this entire sport. You know how good unbeaten David Benavidez is. The way that he's adjusted with his commitment to his stamina and his gas tank, and what he does to fighters in the second half when he starts going downhill with that volume and that power. And then you've got David Morrell Jr., who has such a cool and interesting backstory. The Cuban southpaw who relocated in Minneapolis, helped really build that or add to what is already an underrated and thriving local boxing culture and scene there. We see that when PBC goes to the Armory. But Morrell can really fight, and he was one of those guys who was trying to fight the best in the world that he could in his 4th, 5th fight, right? He picked up a interim or secondary super middleweight title very early on in his march. And even though he looked, gotta be honest, a bit human in his 175 debut on a recent Riyadh Cizan fight card when he took on, I believe it was Hot Rod Kalajic. I don't necessarily hold that against him. This is a real matchup, and what Morrell as a southpaw brings is dynamic. Everything about him is dynamic.
Paul makes an important observation about the contrast in styles. He points out that Morrell, a southpaw, is a more crafty, technical fighter with a well-rounded skill set, while Benavidez is known as a monster in the ring, a relentless, aggressive fighter who becomes an unstoppable force once he starts pressing his opponent. He draws attention to how Benavidez brings that relentless downhill style that forces opponents to weather the storm. For Campbell, this contrast in approach makes the fight even more intriguing. It's clear that the real question will be whether Morrell can handle the heat that Benavidez brings when he goes into full attack mode. Campbell sees this as a true 50-50 fight at the highest level, a battle that could go either way depending on how each fighter executes their strategy. He acknowledges that this could very well be a decision that swings in either direction. But despite this uncertainty, Campbell's confidence in Benavidez remains unshaken. Dan Rafael from Fight Freaks Unite describes the Benavidez versus Morrell matchup as one of the best fights that could have been made. He calls it a 50-50 fight on paper, noting its high significance and the tension that's been building for quite some time. He acknowledges both fighters' skill sets and their ability to make fights entertaining. Rafael said, Benavidez versus Morrell is one of the best fights that could have been made. It's a 50-50 fight on paper. It has high significance, and it's been brewing for a long time. While in the ring, both guys are very skilled, but they also usually make for entertaining fights, so I am really looking forward to it. It's a hard pick, but I'm going with Benavidez by decision in a tough fight. Mark Anderson of the Associated Press focuses on the early strategy of David Benavidez, predicting that the undefeated fighter will look to secure a knockout in the early rounds. Anderson highlights Benavidez's aggressiveness, which could leave him open to some punches from Morrell. Anderson said, I expect David Benavidez to go for the knockout in the early rounds, with his aggressiveness also opening him up to taking shots on his end. If David Morrell Jr. can get through those first rounds and land his own share of punches, I like his chances the later the fight goes. He goes on, saying that Morrell could either rack up enough points to win on the judges' cards or deliver a KO late against a worn-down Benavidez. Across the board, experts are predicting a fight that will come down to key factors: Benavidez's aggression and experience versus Morrell's composure and ability to withstand early onslaughts. The consensus seems to be that it's a close, hard-fought battle with Benavidez generally favored, though Morrell's resilience and skill could turn the tide, especially as the rounds wear on. Don't miss out on the action. Subscribe now for more expert analysis, updates, and the latest in boxing.